And so began the Darkest Days tournament, a 2 versus 2 historical battle tournament held by the Total War Centre, fighting battles in Bibracte and Carrhae as the maps. Now here you see myself, Cluny the Scourge, and my ally Selifator. I'm the Julii and he's the Senate. And our opponents are Dafuge and Confused Johnny, both from the Warriors of Troy clan, and they're playing as the Barbarians, Dafuge as the Gauls, and Johnny as the Germanians. As the battle began, we Romans formed one coherent battle line, and our opponents, the Barbarians, rushed backwards all the way to the very rear of the map and took up a defensive position in a rocky defile between the red line border and these rocks, impassable terrain here. They also put their cavalry in the woods. Now by this point it had become clear that they intended to fight defensively and we were going to have to go and get them. So we marched steadily forward at a casual pace with the intention of bombarding them with our artillery in the hope that this would force them to come down to attack us. At the same time, however, we had to be wary of strikes by cavalry from the woods, as you see here. This was the first such move. They saw an opportunity to hit my archers, which I'd put too far ahead of my infantry. It didn't actually do much damage, but it did have an important effect in concentrating my mind and my allies' mind on the woods and the potential for threats from that quarter, and so it paralysed us from decision making and made us approach much more cautiously, taking far more time, and that time consuming element will in the end prove to be our undoing. As you can see, the Gauls covered one half of the defile and the Germans the other with their infantry. Now, pound for pound, the Roman infantry available, early legionary cohorts, are more potent than the barbarian infantry, and so in a straight slogging match, such as is being offered on either side of that defile, we would eventually win. We were pretty confident. Here you see a further example of our being concerned by possible threats from the woods, and so I sent a cavalry unit out to scout the woods on the left there. Here you see the beginning of our artillery bombardment, which went on for some considerable time, which I've edited out. The bombardment, as always is the case with artillery in Rome Total War, didn't actually do all that much damage. It looks a lot worse than it feels for them. The real value of artillery is in its psychological impact, to try to reduce the opponent's feeling of control and try to lead them into making mistakes. However, they simply sat on the defile and had the discipline to keep taking their punishment and would not come down. Here you see they sent one unit of barbarian light cavalry clear around the army, keeping our attention occupied with them, trying to keep us from making our real move on the defile. And eventually we managed to destroy that cavalry unit, but it all adds up. We also, as you saw there, hit their Gallic general by a complete fluke shot from our artillery. If after some considerable time they sent their cavalry out through the woods in a wide sweeping move, and we sent our cavalry to meet it. Now they made a number of blunders here. First, the Germans and the Gauls separated their cavalry from each other. They needed to keep it massed. We Romans did not make that mistake, as you can see. Secondly, when they ordered their attacks, they simply ordered all of their cavalry with a double right click into the nearest Roman unit, instead of sending one or two units aside to achieve an envelopment, which again the Romans did not overlook to do, and thus we were able to surround each component of the barbarian cavalry and defeat it, even though Roman cavalry in this battle of Bibracte is inferior to the barbarian troops. The Romans only have Roman cavalry and 2 Roman generals and 2 light cavalry auxilia. The barbarians, on the other hand, have several units of noble cavalry, 4 between them, which are much tougher than the Roman troops available. And with the German generals surrounded and cut down, The Julii team, myself, rushes to complete the encirclement of the Gallic cavalry, and thus the Roman faction achieves total, or near total, cavalry supremacy. Which brings me to the third blunder that the Barbarians made with their horse, which was that the Gauls didn't even send all of their cavalry out. They left one unit up on the hill, and you really need to mass your cavalry to achieve the kind of effect that you need in this battle, to knock out the opponent's horse element and then be able to strike at the rear and flanks of the enemy infantry at will as your own infantry engages them. Now by this point you'll notice that the German regrouped routed cavalry makes an attempt to knock out one of the artillery pieces by swinging round the infantry that's been set to guard them, but cavalry are able to catch them, and besides they were too isolated from the rest of their army to be able to resist the concerned by number of enemy morale effect. Now here you see that I sent my archers and slingers too far ahead of my infantry, and mistakenly assumed that we destroyed all of the Gallic cavalry, and so took some unnecessary casualties here. Now by this point in the battle we've used up all of our Onager ammunition, and also far more time than we really had available to us. This is a battle with a time limit, as both of the 2 versus 2 historical battles are, and the Julii and the Senate are now really running short on minutes to complete their victory, even though, just in terms of sheer striking power, we should be able to crush them quite easily now. The Barbarians have Berserkers, which we now don't really have the missile units to take advantage of their vulnerability to missiles weakness against. They also have one unit of Chosen Swordsmen, who are pretty much a match for Legionaries, but otherwise they have only their warbands, the German Spear Warbands, who, though they are formed up in phalanx formation, are not covering their complete side of the defile, and have opened a gap between themselves and the red line, which the Julii are going to exploit in a moment. Here you see the main infantry battle is beginning on this side. We Romans have sent the bulk of our forces, all of the Senate infantry and half of the Julii infantry around this side, at first with the intention of fixing the Germans in place so they couldn't throw everything they had to support the main battle, but as soon as I noticed that that gap I mentioned before had formed, I sent all my cavalry and some of my infantry through to strike against the Barbarians on the far side, as you see here. Now we witness a gradual process of encirclement as all of the available troops from both armies are massed together in one enormous blood orgy, and that's a battle that the Romans, with their superior infantry grinding power, must inevitably win, even if the Gauls do have a partial height advantage against one side there. It is at such a moment that the beleaguered Barbarians badly need their superior cavalry to strike at the rear of the Roman infantry, and it simply isn't available. Also, the Barbarians' choice of ground on which to fight at this defensive position is not actually terribly appropriate for them. The Romans would benefit from a tight and narrow battlefront, but the Barbarians in Bibracte badly need to envelop and surround the enemy, and they simply can't do that here. It's a meat grinder, just such as Roman legionary armies always favoured and in which they excelled. There you see the Roman general on horseback is cut down by a berserker, and as you see, the Barbarian troops beginning their rout cascade. The Germans, the Gauls are all running and being cut down, with the exception, of course, of the German berserkers, who, drunk on Pilsner and whacked out of their skulls on magic mushrooms, don't even know what the hell's going on as they dance their whirligig of death. However, it all turns out to be for naught, due to the Romans' hesitancy and the Barbarians' effective delaying tactics, The time limit runs out, and the Barbarians achieve a draw.